Hello, this is storytelling from concept, content to copy. Now, what I'm going to do here is we're going to play around with telling a story audibly. I'm a podcaster, so I know how to tell a story from the conceptual point of a podcast. So what we're going to do is we're going to take it from a podcaster. I don't know which page I'm on. Oh, this is actually my podcast. Let's see if I can go to my episodes. These are the episodes from my recent podcast. This is my dashboard. This is the place that I create my podcast at. Let's see if I can find it. This is my podcast's website. New episodes, so on and so forth. My mission for my podcast. Why am I showing you this? I'm showing you this because when you're creating a story, you don't have to be sequestered to creating the story only as a written work. You don't have to be sequestered to telling the story as a visual work. I'm going to tell you a secret about my podcast. The reason I created my podcast is because, as in previous videos, I showed you how I write songs. I actually want to use my podcast to eventually be a jumping and launching pad for my songwriting. Secret's out. Because what are songs but stories told to music? Now, there was this guy years ago. I don't watch his videos no more after I became Christian, because he was so good at telling stories, and they were scary stories. I would have nightmares. That's how good these stories were, because I was that visual of a listener that I could listen to what he said, create the visual concept in my head, and scare myself stupid. I am not kidding. I'd be that scared because he told the stories so in depth and in detail, and he added the right sound effects to the audio that literally scared you. The doors slammed at the right time. The creaks happened at the right time. All of its timings perfect. And he did it so well. I remember one time that he was telling a story that it's kind of actually sounded risque of a person getting in bed, and it sounded like, let's just be real, I'm praying everybody's an adult or close to an adult that listens to this, because it sounded like a sex scene. Let's just be honest. When you finished listening to the story, though, it turned out that it wasn't. He was talking about how in depth you can get caught up into a story from a book. That's all it was. But he told it audibly so well that you thought you were in somebody's bedroom witnessing something inappropriate. but that's where your mind went because of the words that he used. If you're a writer, you can literally tell stories on your podcast. Little short snippet stories that are audibly written for a conceptual idea. And even me thinking about this now makes me think that, not to say that I don't want to continue this, but I may do a secondary podcast that I start telling stories on, because I'm a storyteller. And instead of writing out fiction, and maybe just as my way of getting myself back into the writing again, I might do this, because I used to do visual stories in my head. I taught myself to visualize my stories. I would tell head stories where I would just lay there and start daydreaming of a story that I never wrote. It was a story that never was written. It was a story that if I was bored, I would take my brain to that place. I'd just keep writing. I'd pick it up from the scene that I last stopped off at and keep going. And for me, that was fun, because if ever I was bored, I could just pick up a internal story in my head that I started writing. And these stories never got written. This is a whole story concept never got written. Catch-22 to that is, once I created the story in my head, it was hard for me to stop writing it, because I trained my brain to do it so well. When I wanted to relax and not think about writing the story, I had to literally train my brain to stop going there to that place to keep writing the story in my head when I relaxed and didn't want to think. I had to stop myself. But with that being said, have you ever had a thought in your head that turned into a worry, a fear, a frustration, and it built itself? That's your creative brain kicking in, creating a storyline and scenario that can create dread, can create anything, and your brain created it. Why not be useful and use that to create a story using a podcast? I created my own podcast. This podcast actually is talking about creative concepts like money, tithing, other things like make up the difference, talking about self-love, other episodes, new beginnings, starting over, marriage, all of these types of things. But each episode is its own concept, and I tell it from a storytelling place. You have to know where and how you want to tell your story. Know your voice, know your character voice, know all of these types of things. You can even bring in other people, especially if they're voice actors, or if they're friends of yours and they know how to use the inflection of their voice to tell a story. You can tell an entire visual concept, and sometimes it may be better to do it that way, because people hear it and they can create their own visual for it in their brain if they're a visionary. But you have to be able to see the concept in your mind and build it out. Just build it, and you just tell the story. You set the scene, you set the scenario, you set this up in such a way to help you develop conceptual ideas on what it is that you're building. I don't want to make this too long, because I want to talk about some other points, and we're going to go into that in either the next video or the video to follow. So this is Taj McCameron from Storytelling Concept to Content to Copy. Until next time, bye-bye.